Today's episode of According to Hollywood is going to be awesome.
Welcome to Working Class Hollywood, conversations with people that make the movies, TV shows, and entertainment you love. If you're looking to break into or move up in the entertainment industry, or you're just a fan of content and want to hear about how it's made, this is the podcast for you. I'm your host, Jeremiah Smith. My guest today is Viet Nguyen. Viet is a television director, and he is awesome. He's directed shows like The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina on Netflix, The Flash, DC's Legends of Tomorrow, iZombie, and before he was a director, he was an editor for a long time. Viet talks all about how he got into first post, then editing, and then ultimately directing. We talk in length about what a television director does. Viet is a super nice guy. He's very, very smart, and I think you're going to enjoy my chat with Viet Nguyen. All right, I'm here with Viet Nguyen.
Hello.
Viet, thank you for coming out.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So I got in touch with Viet, a girl that works with me on Vanderpump Rules, Nicole Garcia, our post supervisor, put us in touch. But this is our first time meeting. We chatted for like 5 minutes before I pressed record. But other than that,
we're best friends.
But yeah, and already best friends. We both have kids. We both love dogs.
There you go.
We both love Burbank. We have a lot in common.
Exactly. I mean, not a lot of people like all those things combined together.
Exactly. So Viet, where are you from, and how did you end up in Los Angeles?
I am from Austin, Texas, and that's actually how I know Nicole.
That's right.
I grew up in Austin, Texas. The flashy part of my story is that the creator of Veronica Mars and iZombie, Rob Thomas. Not a lot of people know this, but he was actually a high school teacher. He's also from Texas, and he taught high school in Texas.
I knew that.
Yeah, so I was one of his students.
One of his high school students?
One of his high school students.
Gotcha.
That's correct. So this is before he was famous, before he was a big writer and everything, and he only taught me 1 year. He ended up getting a book deal. He took off. But in this class, it was a journalism class. It was broadcast journalism. So this was a class where I learned how to, shoot cameras and edit. Back then, it was tape to tape. So I was, I was learning all those things, and this is where this was my first step into any type of production. And me and a couple of other people in this class, we just were the nerds in the class that kind of like really, really connected with it. And Rob, on the first day of school, he had ordered all this equipment that somebody had advised him to do. He didn't even know how to use it. And then he printed out all the manuals to the equipment and he passed it out to all the kids in the class, which were like only about 8 of us in this class. And he said, "Okay, everybody go home this weekend and read the manuals. And then we'll dig in and try to learn this stuff." And then, of course, on Monday, I was the only nerd that read the manuals. And so I was just kind of into it. At that point, I was a skater and shot a lot of skate videos with my buddies and did all that kind of stuff. So I was already kind of editing a little bit, just like in-camera edits or just little things like that. And then this is where it just kind of took off. And before you knew it, I was basically skipping all my other classes and staying in this room and editing more and shooting more and doing all this stuff. But anyway, I ended up only, taking this class for a year. In this period of time, Rob was also the person who told me, "Hey, there's an entertainment industry." And me growing up in Texas and not really knowing that what it was like out there, I thought you either were an actor or Steven Spielberg.
Right.
You're just like a director or an actor, and that's it.
Nothing in between.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so I started to learn, you could be an editor, or you could be a cameraman, or you could be, there's all these jobs. And these are the things that Rob taught me. So I was very influenced in that 1 year. I ended up going to film school at UT. Rob ended up taking off, and he was an author, but then he became a big TV producer and like got some big deal at ABC and all this stuff. So meanwhile, I'm in film school. I'm shooting my own things. I'm kind of doing, trying to figure out what I like about filmmaking.
Film school at UT, you said.
Film school at UT. I directed my own short films and all this stuff. And then, one day Rob calls me up and he's like, "Hey, I got this show called Veronica Mars." And he's like, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to direct." And he's like, "Okay, well, that's not how it works. I'm not just going to I'm not going to let you direct just like that."
But wait, he just, had you stayed in touch?
Yeah.
Okay.
We had always stayed in touch. We were friends. And, he was always, a mentor. He's been a mentor even to this day. I would consider he's still a mentor of mine.
Yeah.
And, but all through childhood, any short film I shot, he would watch it and tell me how bad it was. But he would take the time to watch it and tell me how bad it was.
That's amazing.
And so, and then eventually when he got his show, I mean, he was in development a lot, and even to this day, it's really hard to get a show on the air.
Yeah.
So you can't. So he had a lot of pilots that were shot, but never really landed. And finally, Veronica Mars became a series. And so he was able to give me that opportunity to say, "Hey, what do you want to do?" And I said, "I wanted to direct." And he was like, "Well, that's not how it works, but I'll give you your first job. So your first PA job specifically. So what do you want to do? Do you want to work on the set? Da, da, da." And at the time, I was like, well, based off of all my experiences shooting short films and stuff, I was really good at editing. So I said, you know what, maybe I could be an editor, as kind of a stepping stone to directing. Mm-hmm. So he's like, okay. So he made me a post PA.
Nice.
And and I even remember when I got hired on that show, the post supervisor and even the post producer were kind of rolling their eyes like, "Ugh, you're a must hire," And they say this later after they ended up liking me because when I showed up and worked my ass off and happily, got lunches for everybody or took out the trash. Or back then, I actually had to drive to LAX every day for deliveries, so that was like 3 hours of driving every day. And I was happy to do it. I was happy to be there. I had other jobs at this point in my life, but I was so happy, and that made me more money. But I was so happy to be just kind of starting over. And I remember my paychecks were like $400 a week or whatever. And but I was happy to do it, and I was excited to be working in TV at all, and just excited to be showing up to work every day and just seeing it happen, even though I wasn't like a big part of it. I mean, or I was a minimal part of it, I guess I would say. And now that I'm doing what I do, I don't. I thought back then I was a minimal part of it, but everyone has a very important job to do for it all to work smoothly.
Yeah.
And so, I guess me having a good attitude was a good aspect to have, as a PA, and it just helped everything else run smoothly in the office and morale and everything. So eventually what ended up happening is that show went 3 seasons. By the 3rd season, I became an assistant editor. Mm-hmm. And getting into the guild is this whole other thing. So you have to be eligible to be you get to join the Editors Guild. So meanwhile, while I was a PA, I was actually I was looking for other things to do so I could try to find ways to get hours or days or whatever to join the guild.
Right.
So I actually ended up volunteering for this TV show that was being made in Orange County. So every day after my 12-hour shift as a PA, I would drive down to Orange County an hour and volunteer my time basically to edit this little local Vietnamese entertainment show.
At night?
Yeah, so at night. So I'd come down there and they'd just give me content to edit, and eventually I was editing stuff. And little did I know that all the stuff that I was doing there actually made me eligible for the guild. So then when I got my bump, I was able to just join the guild immediately. And so, Rob was able to say, "Hey, I have a slot open for assistant editor, but I can't get you into guild." So then I was able to say, "Oh, I got in the guild." So then I became an assistant editor. After that, I was assistant editing other shows. I was kind of bouncing around. And then when Rob created the show Party Down, that was my first show editing. So that was about 10 years ago. And then
I remember that show, and the reason I remember that show is because I grew up with Ryan Hansen. We were both,
you did?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
We were like really close friends back in San Diego. We were both a part of this youth theater group, and we ran in the same circles. And he the girl that he's married to now, Amy, was like her family. I was like really close with her whole family and her brothers and her sister and everything.
Oh my gosh!
So I would watch everything that Ryan was in.
Yeah.
And
whatever happened to that guy? I mean, did he do?
Yeah, he just kind of faded off into obscurity. No, I would like him to come on this podcast. So Ryan, if you're listening, respond to my text, motherfucker.
Oh yeah, and I'm not sure if you know, but I did another thing with Ryan. A spinoff, a Veronica Mars spinoff called Play It Again, Dick.
I saw it on IMDb, and I don't think I ever saw it. It looked
okay. So I directed him in this whole thing, and yes, he's
like the greatest person ever.
He is the greatest person ever,
yeah.
And it was amazing, and he deserves all the success he has right now.
Yeah, he's the best. I love him. So you started editing.
Yeah, so I started editing Party Down, and then after Party Down was over, I kind of just bounced around. Rob didn't have any other shows, and so I couldn't stay. And people, whether you know or not, but I guess people who are not in the know, when you work in TV, a lot of times it's great to just kind of be in a family, join a family, and then a lot of times, even if a show gets canceled, that showrunner will create another show or something, and then you can bounce around and kind of like stay with that family.
Yeah.
Or if you're like, in Shondaland, you can just be in Shondaland forever, and like
Shonda rhymes for anyone that doesn't know,
and just have a career all your life. But in this case, Rob didn't have any shows, so for a good several years, I was bouncing around editing a bunch of TV shows, whether they were comedies or dramas and stuff like that. And so eventually, when iZombie came around, I edited that pilot, and then when the show got picked up, I ended up getting to direct the show, and all in between, I was shooting my own short films. I had shot my own feature by then, and I shot a web series with Ryan Hansen by then.
Mm-hmm.
So I, was kind of building my resume. So by the time I had an episode of TV, I had a bunch of stuff under my belt. And then, so it was a pretty easy transition to kind of start directing the stuff that on the show that I was actually editing as well. Eventually, after directing a few episodes of iZombie, I asked Rob's blessing. I said, hey, you know what? I want to leave the nest now and kind of go off and just do the directing thing full time and not edit anymore. And, Rob obviously our however many decades relationship, he was like, yes, I want you to go soar and spread your wings and all that stuff. So, and then, I fortunately, once I started directing, it was no looking back. I directed 7 episodes of TV last year. So, it was a good transition, and here I am. I'm a director now. I guess.
Congratulations.
I guess.
So what about editing when you were doing it? Were you always thinking like this is a way station for me, like I want to direct? Was that always your goal, going back to like when Rob asked you what you wanted your first job to be on Veronica Mars? Yeah.
I mean, I would say, like, when he said, what do you want to do? I mean, at that point I was shooting and writing and sometimes even acting in my own short films, whatever was necessary to get a project done. And editing was one of those necessities. I didn't have any friends who were editors or anything. So I was the one that kind of learned how to do it, so out of necessity. And then I ended up kind of just being good at it. And it was just one of those things where it was natural, and there's I had the patience for it because as editing can be really, it's like watching paint dry kind of thing. But I just kind of had a knack for it, and so I love it. I loved editing, and so but I love directing, and editing is one of the aspects of, at that time, of just getting a project done.
Right. Because there's a lot of people that they make careers out of editing.
Oh yeah.
And they do it forever and they love it. I guess I'm just curious, like, why, like, what you think it was about you, like, why did you always have that sort of like other goal, that other aspiration, like editing? Why wasn't editing like your end all be all?
Well, I guess in my head, I guess especially the way Rob framed it in that phone call was, I know you want to be a director, but what do you think is your way in?
Gotcha.
Like where could you be valuable in this? And so for me, I, in my small little bubble of indie filmmaking, I seem to be the best editor in my group. There was plenty of other guys who were amazing cinematographers, or just other great things. First ADs who were just like more organized, or could run a set better, or things like that. Had that part of their brain. And for me, I was just like really strong at editing, and so I was just like, well, here's where I can like make an impact and like be useful somewhere. So and I actually don't think that's a bad idea strategically if directing is your end game. What I think now that I look back, I mean, a lot of people, crew people who get a shot at directing sometimes are the people who are the most valuable to the show. And so if you're a first AD and you're just like the best damn first AD in the business, and a show can't lose you, like the show will fall apart and will fall behind or lose money, then, and that first AD says, hey, can you give me an episode to direct? The showrunner be like, fuck yeah. I mean, you are so useful. You are so, and I want to support you. You're so valuable to us. And that's for anything. Script supervisors, there's, actors get the shot too.
Yeah.
But I've seen, a lot of editors get bumped up because they're just so good at, sometimes the footage isn't perfect that comes in. So they're able to kind of work some magic and not have to create another day of reshooting, which is thousands of dollars or whatever. So like you're useful. You're an asset to the team, and so someone a showrunner might want to give you that shot than some stranger that where they're like they're being told by their agency or by the studio or network, hey, you need to hire this guy. This guy's great, and that guy might be great, but they're probably thinking, but a showrunner might be like, well, my editor really kicks ass, or my first AD is really, really good and really wants that first shot too. I think I'm going to do that because I have a personal relationship with that person. I want them to succeed. Right. So it's a good strategy.
That's
to
awesome.
To be useful and really good at something else.
I love that. That's really cool.
Yeah.
How do you think editing those years informs you day to day as a director? Like what skills and knowledge or attention that you put to footage in the edit bay like informs you on set as a director?
Yeah, well, I think just naturally speaking, it becomes muscle memory to know what you need.
Right.
If you're just doing it as a job and it's all just kind of second nature to know what you need to get a scene made and all that stuff. And so there's that. And then I think, so then when you go on a set, you immediately know what you need, and especially if you're behind, if you're having one of those days where, like, oh shit, I only have an hour to kind of, shoot the scene. It's a muscle memory to know, okay, this is essentially what I need if I need to cut this together in my head right now to make the scene work. So for defense purposes, it's useful.
Yeah.
But I would say the biggest advantage of being an editor is, I was an editor for many, many years. That means I worked with, I don't know, dozens, 100 directors.
Right.
And so all these guys are bringing me in all this amazing footage. And, I've said this to people before. I'm like, honestly, I'm just stealing their dance moves. I mean, I'm like, I'm like, holy shit, that was a cool move. Or, oh my gosh, I can't believe they got the camera to move that way while that person walked there. What an efficient way of blocking, but it's also really elegant. Or, or wow, that's a dynamic way of, shooting a scene, just a normal standard scene. So, I think that's what I walked away from more than anything, is just kind of just stealing other people's ideas and, kind of repurposing them for, whatever I'm shooting and stuff. So
yeah.
It's,
Yeah. And that's what we're all doing. We're all learning from people that have been doing it longer than us, that are like smarter and more talented than us. And then that's how we, become our own talent and stuff.
Yeah. I think the other aspect of being an editor too is that, you are there for the end product. So I think, especially now that I spend a lot of time in production, you can be in production and you can be sitting there shooting something, and everyone on the set could be like, "Holy shit, this is awesome! This is great. We know this is awesome." And then, but I've been on the other side where in post, you know, I'm sitting with the showrunner, and the showrunner is just saying, looking at the exact same footage and saying, this is actually completely the opposite thing that I was hoping to do for this scene. This is not the intent of the scene at all. And so a lot of times, you know, in production, you're not gonna always get that. You're on to the next thing. You're shooting the next day, and that's it. And you've assumed it was awesome, and then you won't know until months later when it goes on the air that, oh, that's not what we thought it was going to be or whatever. But as an editor, you could sit there and the showrunner's like, oh man, this is so off from what I wanted. How do we fix this? So then, you know, so now you're kind of getting into the mind of show creators, showrunners and stuff, and really being, you know, in the nitty gritty of it all, like dissecting things of why things don't work and all that stuff. And, you know, eventually you do it long enough, there's a through line of like what kind of works and what doesn't work in certain types of shows and comedies or in dramas and things like that. So again, and then after repetition, it's all second nature. It's all instinct. And hopefully when you jump from show to show as a director, you can kind of take that with you. It's still really hard to kind of nail tone all the time with when you try new shows and all this stuff. But, you know, generally speaking, that's kind of your job, is to kind of understand and, you know, hopefully your instincts are you know, in the right line of what you're doing. You know?
Yeah. You're articulating a lot of things I've thought about. And obviously I work in reality, so it's different, but similar. And I've had the benefit of like going back and forth through my career between post and the field, and, you know, either story producing or editing, and then running crews and stuff like that in the field. And I've always said, and I always believe that people that have the experience in post and know how a show comes together in the end they make the best people and the most intelligent people in the field, because, you know, I do feel like it's kind of like what you're saying, like in the field you can get caught up in this sort of like energy of like the team working together and the talent's there, and like, you know, it's this frenetic pace, and you know, but once you get that footage back into the bay, you know, it might not be what you wanted it to be, or it might be, you might need to make it something else, or you might have, like, you know, everyone thought they did a great job on set that day, but like, oh, they forgot to get like this one shot that's going to like help tell that story. And so the people that have that experience in post are usually the ones that are like, oh no, we need our inserts, we need our wides, we need our whatever. And we don't have directors like you're doing. Well, some reality shows do, but ours don't have. We have just our field producers, but they need to be thinking like directors. And I think post is, in my mind, the best training for that. So it sounds like you're kind of like saying the same thing.
And I will say, you know, even if you don't have a lot of production experience, but, you know, when you're in post, you can still walk onto a set and say, I don't know exactly how to get this shot, but this is the shot I need because it will, you know, convey the emotion of this actor's face or blah blah blah. And then you can lean on your crew to say, okay, well, if you need that shot, we'll need it. You know, if you need a high angle shot or whatever, they can get to the nitty gritty of like, this is what we'll need. Then we'll need this tool. We'll need a crane, or we'll need whatever. And so, you know, it's great to have a knowledge of equipment and everything. But, you know, coming from post and just knowing what you need for them for like an emotional scene or something, you know, even an action scene or whatever, you can then at least go to the field and say, hey, I don't know exactly how to do this, but this is what I need. And
and that's what like those people are there for too. You know.
Yeah.
So tell me what's been your career as a director? Like, what are some of the shows you've directed? Like, what do you like directing? What do you do?
I will say first off, I love directing no matter what it is. And I've told my wife this story, but basically, so I grew up with golden retrievers. I grew up with big dogs. I love big dogs. And my wife one day decided to rescue a dog while I was shooting a film, and so I was out for a couple of days. And I come home, and my wife had rescued this little 3.5-pound fluffy Maltese, and I was just like, "Oh!"
And didn't tell you, just like,
well, she said she's gonna adopt a dog. I didn't quite, it was just one of those things. And
Right.
so I come home, and I guess I kind of, I guess I knew more or less that we're getting some kind of a little dog. I look at this little fluffy white dog, and I'm like, the dog will look great with you, but I have to walk this dog too, and it's like this little, anyway. But regardless, I love dogs. So now this dog, I would say that I'm actually closer to the dog than anyone in the family, and this dog loves me. When I was an editor, I would take the dog with me to work, so I spent the most time with this dog, and this dog is my daughter. I love my dog more than anything.
Yeah.
Would I have wanted a golden retriever? Yes. But, and so that's how I feel about directing shows. Like, look, not all the shows are going to be the shows that I watch, but I still love it. I love dogs. So some of them may be my golden retrievers, and some of them may be my Maltese, But
I love that analogy.
I love dogs, and so, all the shows that I do, you find love, you find something, and sure, it's not necessarily up your alley sometimes, but there's things that you and your wife watch together, and it's amazing to just be there and stuff. But, I will say that, there's roadblocks everywhere. It's all, I'm not the first to say this at all, but it's all a series of compromises when it comes to getting, shooting your episode of television, or shooting your indie film or whatever. It's like, there's so many things that go right, and so many more things that probably go wrong. And,
right.
and then, you end up in editing trying to fix it all. So, but in general, my experience, it's amazing. It's, this is what I've always wanted to do since I was a kid. Never since I took that class, when Rob Thomas's class way back in the day, and now I'm doing it. I'm doing it for a living. And so
what are some of the shows? So I just looking up your IMDb, like I see you've done like some of the DC
so I've done
superhero shows,
Flash and Legends of Tomorrow. I've done iZombie, which is also a DC comic, but that was kind of where I got my start too. And then, I've done Lucifer. That's this next season of Lucifer. I've done a show called Dynasty. And then I just finished shooting Jane the Virgin.
Nice.
So yeah, I've kind of bounced around doing all kinds of different shows.
And how does it?
Sabrina on Netflix is kind of one of the bigger shows.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
And so, I guess just very basically, like, how do you find your jobs? Like, is this your agent getting you a job? Is this like you getting referrals? Other producers, showrunners? Yeah,
I will say, okay. So backing up, one of the things about even being working as a PA on a show, or just being any kind of position on a show, you're starting off alongside with all these other people. So, for instance, I will say when I directed Legends of Tomorrow, it wasn't an easy, jumping from iZombie to a show like Legends of Tomorrow, which is like a super huge action and visual effects heavy show. It wasn't an easy jump. It wasn't an easy in. However, the showrunner Phil Klemmer of Legends of Tomorrow was also his first job ever in television was staff writer on Veronica Mars, where I was PA, and we were friends, and we became friends. And so we had known each other. We've known each other for many years. And, Phil Klemmer has been to my wedding, and, we're friends. And so he got the show, but it wasn't even, he was just like, I don't even know if you want to do my show. This is just a really hard show to do. But if you're going to do it, I would really like for you to shadow another director, so you can just see how crazy it is. And then even after I shadowed, he's like, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And I was like, "Yes, I want to do it." So but you're building relationships even as a PA.
Yeah,
and
that's a theme that's been echoed like over and over and over with people that I interview. It's like that group that you get in with when you first start, like you just kind of hang on and take this ride with those people. Through everyone's kind of individual careers.
Yeah, but I would say, but just think about if I took that job, and I took that job. I was a PA when I was 28, after I had already had all these other jobs and made more money doing it. Just think if I took that job and I was just a total dick, and I was just like, I'm so over this, and this is not, I'm overqualified to be a PA.
Yeah.
Do you think anybody would, ever consider me, but I just trying my hardest at whatever the job was in front of me, and just trying to generally have a good attitude about it, paid off, 11 years later, or 10 years later.
Totally.
So, I will say that if you want to do it, you also should just like really embrace every aspect of it. And I sit here now, as a working director, and I sit in here now very proud that I was a PA at some point. And because I feel like it helps me feel like I belong where I am now, because I did start from the bottom, and I worked my ass off, and I didn't mind.
And you're also running sets now, and what everyone does because you did it, and I think there are people that look at entertainment and think like, oh, all I need to do is write a good script or just like make a good short film, and then it's just like, then I'm going to be directing the next Avengers movie or whatever. And it's like, it's like any other business. You like start at the bottom, work your way up, and all those experiences are valuable.
Right. And, and I've said this, when I talk to, if I'm in an interview or something, I always say, look, I would love to sit here and say I didn't study for the test and I aced it, but I am not that person. I failed many times. I've failed so much it's not even funny, and but I use all that as experience, and I I was just joking. I had a childhood friend of mine who was in that class with me back in the day. He had just come in town, and he was visiting, and we were just talking about the old days of how just starting out, and I was talking about how I have failed literally from like the very first step. Like I wasn't even smart enough to say, like, for instance, we were shooting a short film. So we're like, hey, everybody, let's go out to this field and we're going to shoot this cool action scene. And, we're all like John Woo fans. So we're like, had all these fake guns and we're going to like shoot this shootout. We're like, 17, 18-year-old kids. And we all show up, but like it's in the middle of the Texas summer. None of us thought to bring any water for anybody. Just like that's like the most basic thing that you should probably know. I failed at that, And then I remember like now we're shooting these scenes, and we think, we just shoot this and we shoot that, blah blah blah. 4 hours later, my friend who is like supposed to be the star of the movie, he's like, hey, when are you going to shoot me? Like, when's my scene? And so like I didn't even know how to schedule people.
Right.
Like like these are like I have failed from like the very first step of making a movie ever. So and now I embrace it. I have now had to, I was through trial and error, I've like been forced to like figure out every single aspect of trying to get a production made.
And often people that are successful are those that they're not the ones that don't fail. They're the ones that fail and learn from their failures.
Yes. And, I'm still failing and learning from failures. But, and I would love to be that, I always used, what's his name, the La La Land dude. I'm like, I'd love to be Damien Chazelle and like just be like this genius at 20-something years old. And,
right.
Win an Oscar or whatever. But, I'm not that guy at all.
Those are the anomalies. Those guys are the Darren Aronofskys of the world. Make their first film and just like become famous and successful. Like the majority of the people that are doing this, like it's their career and they've worked from the bottom up.
Right. And like I think people out there, I definitely want my kids to not look at those guys and say I want to be that guy. I definitely want them. I hope to teach them that. Assuming they even want to do this. Because I won't even push them to do this, but But I want them to look at the PAs that are that work their way up, and I would love to hear a great director somewhere that I would love to hear that he was a PA, because I'd probably be even bigger fan because of that.
Right.
Or I would even say someone like Tarantino, who just worked in a video store and wrote a bunch of scripts and finally sold one or whatever. Like at least there. And became famous like after 40. He knows what the struggle's like.
Exactly. You got to pay your dues. I've been working in production for over a decade now, and anytime I'm staffing up a show, I'm always on the lookout for good, competent PAs. And with PAs, you really never know what you're going to get. Sometimes you hire someone and they're amazing, and other times you hire them and they suck. I've often thought, what if there were a class that taught people how to be a PA and then could refer those people to jobs once they finish the program? Well, guess what, guys? It exists. It's called PA Bootcamp, and it's a 2-day in-person training program where they will teach you everything you need to know about being a production assistant. How to handle yourself on set, how to use a walkie-talkie, how to read a call sheet. If you are serious about getting into film production, you have to go to PA Bootcamp. No school, no class, no website gets you into the door like PA Bootcamp does. You can check out their website at www.pabootcamp.com. There's a video for you to watch about the program. If you have any questions, you can also email them at pabootcamp@yahoo.com. The next session is June 8th and 9th in Los Angeles, so go to their website and sign up now. Now, let's get back to the show. I want to talk about just what you do as a director, because, I work in reality. I don't work in scripted. I have like an idea of what directors do based on watching like behind the scenes, specials on like DVDs of movies and like, listening to podcasts and stuff like that. But like, can you kind of walk me through like the process, like beginning to end?
Oh,
like,
sure. Yeah.
You get hired on a show, Jane the Virgin, Legends of Tomorrow, whatever. And then what's the first thing that happens?
Well, first of all, by the way, let me back up a little bit. So I said I got my first that job on Legends, and that was kind of a big deal. But through that, I was able to I did a good enough job, and where eventually Flash was like, hey, we got a couple of slots open. They went to Legends because they're all connected, and they said, hey, who would you recommend? And Legends recommended me. So then, before you know it, like my relationship on Legends got me a job, but then they referred me over to Flash, and then Flash liked me and asked me back. So and then because of Flash, I was able to get something else. So you're getting lined up for things based off of now what
doing a good job and people recommending you.
Yeah, your reputation. And stuff. So then so once you get hired, there it's actually kind of a like a set schedule of how you'll do things, and from show to show it changes. There's little tweaks here and there on when things happen or whatever, but for the most part, on a drama at least, you'll have 7 days of prep, and there's a whole schedule in that 7 days of prep, and then you'll have 8 to 10 days of shooting, so depending on the show, or actually 7 to 10 days of shooting depending on the show. So you first day you show up a prep, you will have gotten the script. Hopefully, sometimes you don't, and so you have to go off an outline. But for the most part, you'll have a script, and you'll have like general meetings, and basically all of prep is like a series of meetings covering a bunch of stuff. But the first meeting will be a concept meeting, and basically you're sitting with all the heads of all departments, and you're just kind of walking through the script with, and so your first AD will kind of walk through the script, and everybody will just kind of talk about things. So they'll say, hey, it says here there's this will happen at a conference center. And this is when a showrunner or the writer or one of the producers will sit there and answer the questions that we may have based off of this, as we're trying to figure out if we need a conference center, how big is this conference center? Can we use a hotel ballroom instead? Those are the things that you ask.
Does it have a view of the city, or is it like a windowless room?
Yeah. Is it expensive? Is it is it on the rundown part of town? Is how fancy? Yeah, exactly. So those are the little questions that you may ask. And so you just kind of go down through the script, and you'll be like, these are things by the way, this requires walking down an alleyway, so let's think about what kind of cars might be in this alleyway or whatever. And so, that's your kind of your very first meeting. It's just a concept meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Then after that, you kind of have an idea of like what the writer was intending for the episode, and then you go off and you start scouting, and then for the next few days you're scouting and finding that conference center or that hotel and kind of reporting back, and then me as a director, I'll be like, yes, I love this because I can shoot this place to look really fancy even though it's not, and so those are the things that as a director I'm trying to visualize. But then throughout the rest of the week, you're also doing meetings like with props. And so you have a prop master who will be like, this is what I was thinking for the kind of gun that the bad guy will use. And I'm like, and a lot of times, they're great at the job, and you're like, perfect, I love that gun too. Or if in my head I'm like, you know what, I love everything you've already thrown at me. The only thing that I really want that's very specific to me is I want the cop's badge to look like this or whatever,
Yeah.
But otherwise, every head of department has been doing this show longer than you have.
And
so
that is an interesting dynamic as a television director versus like a feature director who is like the boss of everything, right?
Right.
Like in a way, like you're stepping into like a system that exists.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like the showrunner is the boss of everything.
Yeah.
You're going to be directing the episode, but then all the other departments, like you said, they're there year round, and you're coming in for like this short period of time. Is that a weird dynamic? Like
it can be, but it's up to your personality. Because for me, you have to understand where you fit, and I always say like you're like second cousin coming to family dinner, like so no one has ever really met you, but they kind of knew you're coming, and they know that you're family anyway in some kind of way, and so but a second cousin doesn't come in and say, I know you always play charades after dinner, but let's play Monopoly. It's like
right.
but you can come in and say, hey, I love that we're playing charades, but I have this like one twist of the rules. Can we try it?
Right.
And so that's kind of like what you want to come in, and you should. And I think that if you're built to understand that, hey, you belong here in a way because you're bringing something, you're bringing your vision, your idea, without shaking things up, and you're doing it to make things better, or and not make things worse, then everyone is on board, and I think the other thing is that no one wants a second cousin that shows up and is like super awkward and never says anything.
Right.
They want a second cousin who's like cool and like, oh, I love that they brought an idea to charades. That was really, really cool. But if you're an asshole second cousin and no one wants you ever to come back, they're like, well, I don't care that he's family, he sucked, whatever. So
you want to be collaborative but not controlling.
Yeah. And so, and the thing is that you also respect, you also have to respect what everyone does, because they do a great job. And, you're a director, and yes, your job is to think of every aspect, but you don't have the time in the day that they do to concentrate on their one department. So, a lot of times if somebody comes to me and it's like, do you like this or this? If I don't have a strong opinion, I'll be like, well, what do you think? Because you've thought about it longer than I have at this point.
Yeah.
So those are the things that you have to be wired to want to collaborate. And then, once you, and I think as an editor, you also need to know that too. You need to know tonally how the show works. Like, there's no big this is not a Jim Carrey comedy. This is more grounded. Those are the things that you need to know as an editor. But so as a director, you come in and you kind of need, you need to know that these heads of departments know what the show is too,
right?
Better than you do sometimes. And hopefully if you know the show really well, then it's a collaborative thing. But I definitely lean on the heads of departments, because they, that's what they're paid to do, and they think about it and they want to do good. And just like you come in and you want to do good too. And I think your job is to kind of like I've heard that the term emulate and elevate. So you want to emulate what the show is, like what you do on Jane the Virgin, you don't do on The Flash, obviously.
Yeah.
So you need to emulate, you need to know the show and you need to emulate it. But then you need to kind of say, hopefully this idea works, that might elevate it a little bit. Maybe they've never done this before. And then, there's some shows that don't like to do anything that they've never done. They want to stick with. So then what can you do to kind of like help that and like at least, elevate in other ways or, something like that. So
you're echoing things that like writers I've spoken to have said, like when you step in on a staff of a show that's already established, they're not necessarily looking for you to come in and be like, all right, guys, we're going to do things differently now because I'm here. It's like you kind of like learn the system, learn the tone, be able to like mimic that, but then also like bring your own ideas into it and hopefully like make it better. Yeah. From the writing process, sounds like the same.
Exactly.
Directing.
You don't just show up and start shooting Dutch angles just for the hell of it,
Yeah.
But however, if there's like for some reason this episode has like some kind of a weird flashback or something, you can say, hey, what do you think about shooting Dutch angles for the flashbacks?
Yeah.
To kind of give it some kind of a weird, or they're hallucinating or whatever, what do we do that? And then they, and then again, you're still collaborating. You're still talking with the showrunner and saying, hey, what if I did that? And they'll be like, oh, I love it. Or they're like, that still might be a little too weird.
Right.
Or at least they'll say, if you want to try it, but give me an option without it so that, I can, fall back on what we normally do if I have to.
Right. So you've got this week-ish of prep. You're doing all these meetings, like,
Yeah, so you're meeting with, like different, like which cars are going to be in the background or what kind of background people are walking in, around, like anything, So it's all being broken down in several different departments. And then finally, usually around the last day, you'll have what is called a tone meeting with the writer or showrunner or both or whatever. And that's when you kind of just go through every single scene and you kind of break down, like, you get all the answers that you need. Like if I say, hey, should this person be crying in the scene? And, a lot of times if you're on a show where you didn't know what happened 5 episodes ago, or you don't know what's happening 5 episodes from now, that's when the showrunner will be like, hey, by the way, this is super important because it's going to pay off 5 episodes from now. So really make sure that this person is not angry when they say this line or, things like that. So that's like the last tone meeting. It's kind of like the big kind of like send off before, and so now you're as prepared as you could ever be. You've gone through every meeting with every department. You've talked to the showrunner probably several times by now about like what the intent of scenes are or whatever, all that stuff. You have all your tools in place. You've talked with the DP throughout the week about like, hey, this scene is really going to require a big crane shot, so we're going to need a crane for that day. Those are all the things that you're
Are you storyboarding the episode as well?
No. You are. If you're super prepared, you should block and shot list it yourself. And then if on certain shows like The Flash or something, if this is a big action sequence or whatever, then yes, you may storyboard with someone. But on a show like Jane the Virgin, don't storyboard. You don't storyboard anything like that. So,
gotcha.
And so and then you go off to your 7 to 10 days of shooting, and then hopefully everything has been thought out. And so you show up on the now that you're in shooting, you show up, you block with an actor and say, hey, this is what I was thinking that you would do. The actor may say, oh, I don't think. Especially because this actor has been, doing this show for 900 days or whatever, they might say, you know what, I don't think I'll be sitting here. I think I would probably be standing up. And then, so you tweak what you're doing and, or you talk it out and, usually, and that's a collaborative process too. You don't normally get an actor who's like, fuck you, I hate you, don't listen. Although I've gotten maybe a couple of experiences like that, but anyway, normally they're all the stars of these shows are like, oh, okay, yeah, I love that idea, or they'll say, oh, I was thinking maybe I would do this instead, and then you kind of talk it out, and then now that's blocked out per your plan, and at least you have already thought it out, so that you're not like standing there going, what, maybe you should stand here, or no, maybe you should stand there. You've thought it all out, and the actor has already started it out, and then you kind of cross-checking your thoughts.
Do you get rehearsals for scenes?
And you'll just like, you'll rehearse a little bit,
but this is like on the day you're shooting.
On the day you're shooting, yeah.
So you guys all show up. We're shooting these 2 scenes today, or 3 scenes, or whatever,
and you're doing it right there,
you
right then and
block
there.
it, rehearse it.
and then
shoot it.
just like that.
Wow.
And yeah, now if you're doing like a movie or a pilot or whatever, then yes, you have a little bit of time to kind of bring everybody together and go through the scenes and kind of rehearse a little bit and really make sure we're all on the same page. But, in television, a lot of times, I mean, these guys, those actors are working every day, so much. And so, if you think about it like a 20 episode show and it's, 8 days each, that's what, 160 days? Is that, I don't know math, but these guys are working 160 days. They, like, when are you going to go and rehearse if you're shooting every day?
Right.
It's like, so yeah, that's just the nature of how it works. So.
Interesting. And so what is your main job on the set as the director? Now you're in production. Like, what's your main focus?
Well, your main focus is getting the scene shot and hopefully in line with what the showrunner wants, and giving enough options just in case you didn't do what the showrunner wanted. So, getting takes, getting hopefully alts of stuff. Maybe you have an idea as you're watching them say the lines, you're like, you know what, maybe they should be angry here. And so, that's instinctive things where it's like, I know they shouldn't be angry, but maybe we'll get a take where they could just go for it and see if that works. And then, eventually that all that footage ends up getting to the editor. They edit together. And so, yeah, you're shooting the scenes, and you're making sure that. By the way, there's a schedule, so you have to shoot all this stuff within 12 hours.
Right.
So, and so you and the AD have already thought out, oh, this scene we think is going to take 3 hours to shoot, so we better do it in 3 hours. If we do it in 4 hours, we're really fucked because now we only have 1 hour to do the next scene, which when we needed 2, that's only half the time. So those are the things that you're also kind of balancing too. But that probably should be less on your mind and more about getting the scene shot correctly.
Right. That's like the AD's job to be managing the schedule.
Yeah.
All right. I have some like really technical questions.
Go for it.
Because I always think about this.
Yeah.
So on our set, in reality, typically the setup is we have 2 cameras and then an audio mixer. And then we'll, for a normal scene. So if we were filming this scene right now, we would have 2 cameras, one pointed on you, one pointed at me. Then like kind of during the scene, we would like mix up our shots. Like, all right, let's get a 2 shot. Let's get a big wide from the other side of the room. If we reference something, we'll like, maybe hold the action for a minute, like dive in, get our inserts, or maybe at the end of the scene we'll like, we'll like make a little list, like, oh, I need an insert of his phone, I need an insert of him like twisting the knob on the mixer or whatever. But it kind of all happens like continuously, like almost like real time, right?
Right.
So like when you're shooting a scene in a scripted television show, do you have 2 cameras to capture the performances of both actors? I'm assuming this is a 2-person scene. Or do you do like, if it's a 1 camera, one side of the performance, the other camera, other side of the performance, then the medium, then the wide, like kind of what's the...
Usually it's really actually hard that's called cross shooting, to shoot both actors at the same time. And it's all based on lighting purposes. So you do have 2 cameras for the most part, but usually it's 2 cameras on 1 actor at a time.
Okay.
Or yes. And usually you will start, because it's all based on lighting, you will start with the widers first, and you'll shoot wide, and maybe the second camera can shoot a little bit tighter wide, or medium or whatever of a 2-shot. And then when you go in, it's usually 2 angles of that single person. So maybe it's right, like one over the shoulder, and then if you can fit it in, you can get a tighter of the same thing. But if not, maybe it's a profile or whatever. Mm-hmm. So it just but usually now look, I love cross shooting, and I wish I could do that forever, because it helps the actors too, because they can just talk over each other and
play off each other
and stuff like that. But the worst thing I ever have to say is like, hey, make sure you don't talk over that person, because that's going to screw up on sound, and then I can't get that guy's line, or shit like that, where they should be able to talk to each other, because that's how people talk. But
so anyway, you'll shoot one side of a performance and then relight, and then shoot the other side.
Turn everything around and shoot the other way. And
interesting.
And that relighting could take 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So then the actors have to kind of settle down and then ramp back up to get that scene, do the scene all over again.
That's so interesting.
And then, there was one time where because there was a stunt involved, I had to shoot one way. A car was going to explode or something like that. So I had to shoot all one way, no matter what. So there's a whole dialogue, then there was a fight scene, then a car explodes, and then after all that, then I had to turn around and shoot the dialogue, the fight scene, and then it was like I forgot the exact logistics of it all, but so then the actors really kind of had to like go way back, and this is like hours later. So you were talking about like a person, they do a standoff scene like, at let's just say 6 o'clock, and then they're doing a fight, hours later, and then like a car explodes or whatever, and then we turn the cameras around, and then they got to go back to that standoff scene after they had already fought.
Wow.
So then now you're backing up, and this is like, maybe 6 or 7 hours later, they have to go back,
get back in that headspace,
and get back into that headspace, and then shoot that coverage. And so, sometimes it's really inconvenient, but because of, like the car had to explode only in a certain angle that we had to, I think we had to save it and then explode it. So, anyway, there's all the stuff that had to happen where there's just logistically, you can't just make a car explode twice. So we had to like, I forgot what we did, but anyway. And so, yes, that's sometimes you gotta force an actor to do that, which is the worst thing ever. I hate doing that for actors, but sometimes that's what you gotta do.
How many takes would you say on average each scene you're doing?
I would say I'm on the low end. I usually do
because you're that good.
No. I'm probably a lot. That's probably what makes me bad. No, and I'm not joking. That probably makes me bad. But I probably do like 3 or 4 takes. Usually, and sometimes the actors want to keep doing it because then they find new things and stuff. So, and maybe, honestly, sometimes I make that's where I make it bad because they don't get that time to ramp up or whatever. But I don't know. It's a case by case basis.
Right.
I've had, something where I had to shoot like 9 takes or whatever. And then one time we were shooting just like this visual kind of gag, and it was like 20 something takes. So,
yeah,
it just kind of depends.
So you get like a week to shoot the show, more or less?
Yeah, 7 to 10 days, depending. Sometime, I've done like when I did Sabrina, I ended up doing like 14 days because, it's a big, massive show and a lot of moving parts. And, so it's, you need that time to kind of really make sure that it like, it's kick-ass and everything.
Right. And then do you carry on with the episode into the edit bay?
And so then after you shoot, that the editor will have about 2 to 4 days to kind of finish it all up. And while you're shooting, they're getting footage all week long.
Right.
So they're kind of piecing it together. But then at the very end, when they get the last of the footage, they get that 3 or 4 days to kind of like put it all together, put music to it, put sound effects, and kind of make it look like what it would look like on the air before they really put all the bells and whistles to it. And so then they'll give it to me, and I'll sit down and I'll have 4 days to kind of mess around with it. And, a lot of these editors, they know the show. They're ahead of their department, so they know the show. But there might just be those things where I'll say, oh, you know what? This is something that I was trying to do differently than what you normally do. So sorry, let me explain, and let's tweak that to do this or blah, blah, blah. And so that's where you kind of take that time to kind of tweak things. And then you turn it into the showrunner, and then they'll have like, however many days.
Right.
It could be 2, it could be 7 of tweaking it, and then they'll give it to studio, and then the studio will give notes, which is like, a day turnaround. And then after that, they'll give it to the network, depending on what show you're on. Yeah. Sometimes it's both. The studio and network are the same thing, so it's one person. Network gives notes, and then they say, okay, let's lock it. And so then you lock. Locking means basically, okay, everything is done. The picture cut is exactly how we want it. And then after that, they send it off in post-production, which is like a whole other thing. Which is,
yeah, I've had people on that like talk about like online editing.
Oh yeah, there you go.
And like all that kind of stuff too.
Yeah.
Do you think that your time as an editor helps or hurts you working now with editors as the director?
Well, I would say I know what your question is, which means like how neurotic are you? Maybe is the question. But I think no matter what, more knowledge is better than no knowledge. But yes, I mean, I think that you can sit in the room and be like one of the things I refuse to do is look at the computer screen. That's what they're doing, because then I could be like, in my head, I might be like, well, why did you do a lift there when you could have just pushed this button? And
or like I would have rolled that frame, I would have rolled that cut 12 frames to the left.
Yes.
And like,
so
there's a term for that. They call it frame fucking.
Yes.
So you don't want to frame fuck your editor.
Exactly. So then I refuse to do that now as a director. But unfortunately, when I was first directing, when I was an editor, my assistant editor got a bump to edit what I would direct. And then I would sit there and watch my assistant editor.
Oh, interesting.
Who is is a friend of mine or whatever. So then I'm like watching my friend go and be like, "What are you doing? Why are you doing that? Stop it!" And then just start yelling at them. So I've learned to step back. So yes, that's the correct question. But however, there is the knowledge of having been an editor. I do understand. Which I try as hard as I can, but you can't always do it. But normally, as an editor, you should say, hey, this person in this scene feels like they're like low energy. Do your thing and make this person feel more awake. Or this scene's not kind of as funny as I imagine. What can we do? And then they can go do their thing. Versus going, okay, just cut there.
Right.
Okay. 6 frames this way. Okay. And sometimes look, you have to do it. Sometimes there's, because you
get out of the chair. Just let me get on the keyboard for a second.
I haven't done that yet, but yeah. So,
that's like James Cameron level. Like right. Didn't he gets like
but
editing credits.
I think he's an editor,
movies,
right?
Because I think he does.
Yeah.
He's probably just like so controlling and OCD that he just like kicks people out of chairs and be like, I have to do this myself.
But, and I've always understood, to be honest, that aspect too, because, if you know how to do it yourself, then you're taking out the middleman and you could just kind of do it yourself, push the buttons, as opposed to saying, okay, do this. No. And then sometimes you're like, no, push this button instead because, if you know how to do it. So yes, I kind of understand that, but but you also, again, everyone wants to bring something to the table, and the last thing you want to do is take a person's job. Like I wouldn't, I'd never go to a costume and say, "What are you doing?"
Give me that needle and thread. I'm going to sew it myself.
Exactly. And I mean, like, who the fuck would ever do that, right? So, but I do say I do have a saying on set though. I whenever I'm in a predicament, I always think to myself, what would JC do? What would James Cameron do?
That's funny. I was like, wait a second, Jesus Christ. Awesome. So, Viet, what advice, and you've given a lot of good advice through the course of this conversation, but like anything else that you could think to for people that want to break into the industry, that want to direct, that want to work in TV, like what words of wisdom can you offer?
I would say there's a couple things I feel very strongly about, and one of them I already talked about, which is have just a good attitude, no matter what your job is. And my
guest two episodes ago, Grant, who works for Marvel Television, he boiled that down to don't be a dick.
Don't be a dick, exactly. But it's not even. I would even say go beyond that, which is be accommodating. Like someone told me, put it in terms of if you have a job and your sole job is just pull out organize M&Ms for someone, and that's just your job. I mean, do a damn good job of it, because then whoever is asking you to do it, it's like, well, fuck, that person is like really killing it at organizing M&Ms. I could trust this person to do something, give this person more responsibilities, and then, you amplify that. So It's like, if you're just doing a really damn good job as a PA, someone's going to want to go out of their way to say, man, this guy is fucking good, and I want to help this person. because this person deserves it, and will, and then there's selfish reasons too. That person can say, that person will make me look good if I recommend that person, and that just helps my reputation. So, there's a lot of reasons, but on top of that, if you can be happy, I mean, that's probably easier than being a dick,
Right,
so
right.
that's one thing. The other thing I would say is, look, I got a lot of opportunities. I was lucky to know Rob Thomas. And but I will say that every opportunity I got, I was ready. So when I became an assistant editor, I knew Avid. When I became an editor, I had already edited a shit ton of stuff on my own. A lot of short films, and just anything. When I was an assistant editor, I would edit scenes, even if I wasn't required to edit scenes. I would just edit scenes anyway to practice on my off time or whatever. So on top of just having edited a lot anyway, so I was ready. And then when I became a director, I had directed a lot of stuff, and even if it was my first episode of TV and I hadn't done my feature film and a web series, and I could still say that I had directed, and I'm not shitting you, like 80 short films.
Wow.
So like I was ready, and I made probably 75 shitty short films, and 5 of them I will show people. Like I would love to, and cat's out of the bag now, but like I would love to just say, yeah, I've made about 5 short films, and these are my 5 great ones, like 5 great short films. But like, I at that point I had made a short film that like had won a bunch of awards and got into a shit ton of festivals and stuff, and like that, by the way, that short film was the short film that Rob, after a couple of decades of saying, yeah, you're kind of making shitty short films, he finally is like, wow, this is really good. I mean, this is great.
What is it called?
It's called Crush the Skull.
Can people find it?
Yeah,
anywhere?
it's on YouTube.
Okay, awesome.
It's Crush the Skull, and it ended up winning a film festival, which it gave me a Panavision package, and so that Panavision package I used was like $100,000 worth of equipment to shoot my feature film.
Amazing.
From that, and so but by the time I was directing my first episode of TV and they'd given it to me, people, even if people were like, let's see if he's gonna do a good job or not, might have been a little bit nervous about it. They knew that I'd done a shit ton of stuff. Like at that point, and I knew I had done a shit ton of stuff. And sure, there was like a workflow thing that I wasn't maybe aware of when I was directing. But like, again, that muscle memory of like, just shooting so much shit and having to piece it together and make a story out of it. And no matter how terrible it was or whatever, I used to always say, like, I've worked with so many shitty actors who think that they were good, and then I'd have to sit in the editing room and like fix the shitty.
Right.
And
by the way, made them good by editing.
And by the way, one of those shitty actors was me. Acting in my own short films and stuff. But and then so by the time you go to TV and you're actually working with professional actors, you're like, oh shit. Like it's like it was like way easier talking to actors, you know. So I think that's the other important thing. It's like be ready, and don't put yourself in a position where like once you're there, everybody's looking at you and saying, does that person deserve to be there?
Right.
You should be able to say, hey, I fucking worked my ass off, and I was a PA just like you, or maybe not like any of you guys. And so I deserve to be here, and I have a resume to show it. So, even if you're shooting cat videos and, or whatever, or just directing your children, in a short film, but piecing it together and making a story out of it, you're learning something, and you're putting that as experience in your head. And you're going to use that later.
Yeah.
You're going to eventually at some point go, oh shit, yeah, there's that one time I was able to get 2 kids who didn't want to even be in the fucking video to say a couple lines and da-da-da-da. And like now all of a sudden you're like in that same situation. You're like, oh yeah, I basically shot that as like a oneer and was able to kind of like, get two kids to do it, so I can totally get these actors to do it,
Right.
in a one air or whatever. There's things that you'll start pulling from your experience.
See, I use
be
getting
ready.
my kids to do things as like inspiration and practice to get the cast of Vanderpump Rules to do things. So I'm like, if I could deal with like hangry 6-year-olds, I could deal with drunk 34-year-olds. Like, similar mind frame.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And so what do you see for yourself long term? Like, do you have other goals, aspirations? Like,
I mean, I'm now developing stuff, so I got some things cooking, and hopefully,
TV, movies, both.
Yeah, TV, and I had a feature film that I did, a horror comedy, and that I did a few years ago, and so I'm kind of following that up right now, working on the script for another horror comedy feature, and just trying to create my own content as well.
Awesome.
as direct other people's stuff, which is now my job that I love, and so now it's just kind of branching out.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much
for
coming in.
This is
you
great.
are a delight.
This is like therapy. Like,
well, I'm sure people
stuff.
are going to enjoy listening to you. You're an awesome guy, so thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
All right, that was my conversation with Viet Nguyen. Thank you guys for listening so much. I really, really do appreciate it. If you haven't already, please go on to iTunes, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, wherever you're listening, and subscribe. Rate the podcast. Leave a review. It is very helpful to the show. If you want to reach me, you can. My email address is show@workingclasshollywood, or you can find me on Instagram @workingclasshollywood. Thank you guys again, and I will see you next time. Carter, do you want to say bye to the people?
Okay, Butter, it's time to say goodbye. Bye, bye, bye. Goodbye, 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 bye, bye.